Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning, my friends and fellow elite achievers. Good to be with you again today. As some of you know, one of the professional positions I hold is Director of Member Progress for a Florida-based consulting company, how to manage a small law firm. And my role with that company is to ensure that all 330 member law firms are progressing, they're increasing in job satisfaction, employee morale, and of course, finances. And it's a blast. And this week I was having a conversation with a member about problem solving. As business owners and leaders, we all face challenges. If you don't, you're not really leading. And guess what? You can't hide out. These problems need to be solved. So the conversation was about proactive solutions versus reactive. Oftentimes I find business leaders struggling under the reactive problems, meaning the problem presents and the leaders work to solve it. Problem first, solution second. Does that sound like you? This is reactive. But what if we identified potential problems before they present and put in systems, policies, or procedures to handle them before they become huge time-consuming issues for your business or your team? Now that's proactive. So today I want to introduce you to the architect of provocative leadership training, Mr. Biagio Sciacca, or Bill as his friends call him, and we are his friends. Bill is author of Goals book, Embracing Personal Responsibility in an Age of Entitlement, and a trainer consultant in strategic management and leadership. Growing up in the coal mining district of Northeastern Pennsylvania, Bill has a way of melding social sciences, humanities, and plain old common sense to leadership principles. I could go on for days on his bio, but let me hit some highlights. A master's degree and PhD in business admin. He taught micro and macroeconomics since 1982 at the university level, most recently Penn State, owned a donut and ice cream franchise chain, writes and records his own guitar songs, and is a certified spin instructor. Bill, I'm exhausted, and that is only a very brief synopsis of your background. It's so good to have you with us today. How are you?
Oh, I am fabulous. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, that's a mouthful. You are doing so much. How do you get it all in?
Well, a professor at Penn State once asked me, where do you find the time to write books? And I said to him, I don't find the time. I schedule it. And I think that's a very important point for anybody in the business world. You need to schedule your time.
So what you're doing is you're prioritizing what's important in your life, and then you're making the time to do what's important in your life, scheduling it. And that, by necessity, equates to eliminating the things in your life that aren't important or are B priorities. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, you got it, my friend. You know, saying no is just as important as saying yes. Steve Jobs said that at Apple, they were just as proud of what they said no to as what they said yes to. And, you know, there's just some things that you can't do, and then you need to embrace the things that you feel are important to you. What happens, though, as you get older and your interests expand, you find that there's more things that you want to say yes to. So you need to be even more miserly with your time.
And I'm wondering, so yes, as we have more and more on our plate, we have to be more miserly. But I think some of our younger listeners also face the challenge, and that is they want to be a pleaser. They want to please everybody around them, and it's hard to say no. I know, Bill, that I struggle with this. It's hard for me to say no to anybody. And so how do we become better at this? I'm saying no, I'm protecting my time.
Well, this may not be the best time frame to quote Bill Cosby.
No.
But Bill Cosby was instrumental at saying this. I don't know what the secret of success is, but I know the secret of failure. It's trying to please everybody.
Yeah.
And that really is the key. Do you know, you think about this for a second. You let somebody out in traffic. That person thinks you're a hero. The next person you don't let out, that person thinks you're a goof. The only separation is your action based on the moment. So you need to do what you need to do, how you need to do it, please who you can, but make sure that you put yourself first and foremost in the process. And I don't mean that from a greedy standpoint. If you've for everybody that's done any air travel, you know that the flight attendant says that if there's a sudden drop in cabin pressure, the air masks are going to fall. Before you help somebody else, what do you have to do?
You got to put it on yourself.
You have to help yourself. And consequently, it's really strange. If you really want to make a better world, you need to make a better you. And the way you make a better you is by concentrating on what's important to you and growing on a consistent basis.
And I often tell this story. For years on my computer screen, I had this silhouette picture of two climbers, one climber at the top of the cliff reaching down, helping the other climber up. And for years, I stared at that metaphor, which basically says, you can't help someone to the pinnacle of success. You can't help someone become better unless you're standing on a higher plane. And the only way you can get there is by taking care of yourself. It's not selfish. It's about putting your needs first so that you're in a position to put other people's needs as a priority.
Absolutely. And I've seen that picture too. Do you notice how the climber who was helping was above him? Exactly what you said. Do you notice how climbers don't push the other climber up? They pull them up.
So we've got a goals setting master with us for just a few minutes today, and I'm looking forward to talking with you. But what do we want to talk about? We want to talk about high octane leadership. All the listeners to the Modern Leadership Podcast are leaders in some capacity, whether in their business or even if they're not by title a leader, they're seeking leadership responsibilities and positions. And so I want to dive into some of these principles of high octane leaders. You've got 7 of them, Bill. So let's jump right into them. Let's start with number 1. What is one of the attributes of a high octane leader?
Well, that's fine. Before we even begin that, understand the term high octane. What I am assuming is that everybody that wants to charge their leadership skills and repertoire, these are race cars. These are individuals that require high octane fuel. So consequently, what I want to provide is the petrol, the fuel, the high octane go that's going to allow supercharged engines to do even better. And the first attribute of high octane leadership is mental application across business problems has to be consistent. Let me explain that. If you were going, let's assume that you came through the ranks of your organization in the sales and marketing department. So consequently, you like sales, you like marketing, you like that rock and roll feel of getting out there and making things happen. But now you're above several departments, and one of those departments is accounting. And accounting people and sales people are very different. The culture of the accounting department and the sales department are very different. Guess what? You need to treat both of those with the same degree of mental application. You have to be consistent. If your accountants feel like they're kind of the redheaded stepchild sitting in the corner, then they're going to perform that way, which means you need to apply mental application consistently. Now, at this point, some of the listeners might say, well, wait a minute. I think sales is a lot more fun than accounting. Yeah, well, here's the point. As leaders, you need to get over that. You need to do what's necessary to make everybody feel inclusive.
You got to get high performance out of everybody on your team. And as you were talking about consistency, I was thinking about stock charts and stock earnings reports. I used to work in the stock market, Bill, and when an earnings report would come out, if it met what the street or what the analyst expected it to, the stock stayed pretty relatively okay. But when they came out and there was some inconsistency, they came out and they either made more money than they thought they would, or they lost more money or didn't make as much money as they thought they would. All of a sudden, the stock is going wild because people don't know how to adjust to inconsistency. So when you're consistent, people know what they can approach you with, what the expectation is. And because of that, it reduces anxiety within them. And there's more focus on actually producing and less on the emotion of anxiety. So I love that high octane leaders have consistency. What's the next step?
The next is this: intensity is a choice. You choose the mental intensity that you put forth in a problem. You know, Jake, if I had 2 math problems in front of you, one was an addition problem and one was a linear algebra problem trying to solve a series of matrices, there's a very good possibility that you would be putting a lot more mental intensity into the latter versus the former.
Of course.
Now, if you put the same level of intensity into the matrice problem as you did into the arithmetic problem, By the time you got through with 5 arithmetic problems, man, you're going to be exhausted. So you got to conserve your intensity for when it's necessary.
And does this also kind of have to revolve around, when you're at your peak performance? I mean, some people are morning people and know that between 8 and 10, this is when they get their best work done. So schedule your most important projects, the ones that take your most mental energy during those times. And then maybe between 1 and 2 in the afternoon after lunch, when you're kind of dragging, do some of your less intense activity, maybe responding to email or something like that. Does that play into this?
Oh, absolutely. Back in the early 90s, we used to call it biorhythms. I haven't heard that term too much anymore. I guess since grunge died, I guess biorhythms died and so forth, whatever. But anyway, the point is that you need to know when you are ready for the kind of intensity required for the position. And I'll give you an example. I wake up very early in the morning, and during that time frame, the very early morning hours, I tend to be somewhat contemplative. So I spend my time doing thinking problems at that point. My high energy work normally comes after 10 o'clock in the morning, and that's just because I know my rhythms.
Perfect. So now that we know when to put our energy and really to intensify our input, what do we do for attribute number 3?
Strategy does not necessarily equal strong tactics, but strong tactics equal a great strategy.
Oh, unpack this. This is good stuff.
It's funny when in my consultancy, I have seen managers, executives pull strategy out of their hat and have it worked because the underlying foundation was weak. They figured out what to do. In other words, the tactics propping the strategy up was not necessarily good. Strong leaders have the ability to figure out what the strategy is and move that strategy toward the vision of the organization. But I will tell you this. Whenever there is a strong tactical base toward a strategy and it makes perfect sense to everybody who has to implement those tactics, the strategy works swimmingly. So what's the moral to this story? Spend your time on the details of the tactics and the strategy will take care of itself.
That is a quotable quote that will be found on the website. I love it. How about number 4 attribute, Bill?
Communication must be 360 degrees. And by that, I mean this. Most individuals in the organization do a stellar job communicating upward to their direct report, to their boss, I should say. And that makes perfect sense because those are the people that are signing your check. So you really need to make sure that you are communicating properly to that individual. If your boss calls and say, hey, how do we do last quarter? And your response was, not bad. That's not really a great response. So we normally communicate upward very well. Here's a question that I have for all the leaders and budding leaders out there. How are you communicating downward? How are you communicating laterally? How are you communicating to the other various individuals that you need to speak to, suppliers, vendors, customers? Is your communication as precise with them as it is with the individual that's signing your check? If it's not, figure out where the gaps are and change them. Albert Einstein said it best. He said, I treat everybody the same, whether it's the garbage man or the president of the university.
Well, and this kind of relates back to that story with John F. Kennedy when he said, we're going to put a man on the moon, and NASA, all the employees, basically, they knew what their role was. Hey, we're going to the moon. And this is everybody in your organization is striving for the same outcome, the same goal. And the only way that they can strive to get there is if they have the information. Now, Bill, we talk a lot in business these days about 360-degree reviews where, we kind of monitor our performance based on, allowing people below and on the side of us above us to kind of rate and review us. What you're talking about is so different. It's communication. It's not waiting for a review period. It's a continuous process. It's basically the culture of the company is to share in 360 degrees. Is that right?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Jack, you know what? This is going to be out as a 7-part series ebook in the next few months. And I'm actually thinking of changing the name of that to Communication Must Be 361 Degrees. And the 1 degree means just because you hit 360 degree doesn't mean it stopped. Keep going.
Keep going. in the visual on it, you have the circle with the arrows, which means it's constantly going around and around. And also with the 1 degree, when you said that, what I imagined is you are in the middle of this. You are the 1 degree in the middle while you have 360 around you. So that's awesome. How about our next attribute of a great leader or high octane leader, number 5?
Number 5 is momentum is just as important as direction. You know, every organization has their mission statement cast in bronze in their lobby. And if you think about it, what the mission statement or vision statement, for the context that we're talking about, I'll consider them synonymous. The vision mission statement implies direction. What it says is that, ladies and gentlemen of the organization, employees, we are going to take the resources of this organization. We are going to mold them and meld them in such a way and market them so that we can take the money and move that way. And that way is whatever direction the vision statement suggests. And that's cool. Direction is very important. But we can't forget momentum. And momentum is how congruent does that message of vision and mission trickle through the various silos of the organization. The more congruency that you have, where you can open up the calendar of the lowest level employee and map their behaviors, what they're going to do that day to the vision statement, that's congruency, and that will speed up momentum. The end result is direction, vision is implied by direction, but how congruent the individual employee's behaviors are to that vision statement, that's momentum.
And I think we could have a full podcast on basically how to do this, because you've got this momentum, you've got direction, and most of us understand. I mean, for years, 30 years plus, we've been talking about companies having mission and vision and, you know, knowing what you stand for and being authentic to who you are and the type of client you're chasing after and working with. But this momentum is a new topic. So I know we could spend a lot of time on it, but do you have any just quick thoughts that we can look at for getting the momentum moving in the direction that our vision and mission have created? No,
just kidding. I don't have any. I don't have any additional thoughts, but I have the quote of a very, very learned writer, Michael Korda. Wrote several blockbuster business books back in the late 60s. One was called Power, and the other was called Success. While I don't suggest them as required reading today because the tactics in those books are a little outdated, Michael Korda did say this: one way to keep momentum going is to have consistently greater goals. And if I could unpack that for a minute, the difference between where you are now in your goals program, individually or as a business, and where you want those goals to be, that vacuum in the middle is potentiality. And as we continue to move from the as is to the should be, we grow. That growth is momentum.
I'm so glad I didn't let you answer that question with a no. That is such great wisdom right there. Bill, I appreciate that. How about if we move on to number 6?
Your personal internal script must be congruent to your outward behavior. Walk the walk. Do what you say you're going to do. How many times have we come across managers who say something like, we have to control expenses? And yet they're the ones that whip out the company Amex Gold Card to lavishly treat somebody unnecessarily. How many times do we have managers saying that I expect everybody here on time in the morning, and they get in 10 minutes late? Consequently, here's the end result. We have to believe that our internal script, our dialogue, and how we act on the outside, they have to be the same. Now, ultimately, this delves into psychology a little bit. What are you thinking about? What's going on internally? One of the things that I coach individuals and leaders on all the time is I want to know who's talking in your head. What's going on in terms of the individual that's whispering in your ear?
Telling you stories between your ears.
Absolutely. You know, Zig Ziglar said it best in one of his webinars. He said, closing a sale is not between you and the prospect. It's between you and your mother. And what he meant by that was, Mom always said to him, Zig, you be very nice to people. Well, when you're closing a sale, you have to make them feel a little uncomfortable to get them to move. So whenever he was closing a sale, Mom was in his head saying, Zig, you're not treating that person very nice. He had to squelch Mom's voice before he became a master salesperson. And I think we all have to do that. We have voices, mommies, daddies, preachers, teachers that are telling us things back from when we were 6 and 7 years old that is not necessarily relevant to our life and role as a leader.
The lessons and stories that they told themselves are not the same ones. You talk about the book, and while the business principles and tactics have changed, the idea of momentum is the same. The same thing goes with the stories that we've learned growing up. And I deal with a lot of coaching clients that face a lot of these challenges, Bill, where they grew up basically being taught and told one thing, particularly about money and the what it means to have money and the self-esteem behind, what it means to have significant amounts of money. And I deal with a lot of mindset issues based around that. And what you're saying is exactly right. You got to understand what story, what script is going on between your ears and where it's coming from. Is it coming from a place that, of good intention, but maybe not good as far as productive for you moving forward? And that's sometimes what happens with Zig. It wasn't that his mom it wasn't that he wasn't being nice. It's a matter of, in sales, you've got to make that uncomfortability, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so I think of the 7 attributes, this is my favorite so far. I don't know what 7 is. We'll talk about it here in just a second, but this one is so important. The story you tell yourself between your ears changes and impacts everything you do in life and business and as a leader.
Absolutely. And if we want to apply a leadership or at least a management example to that, so we have an employee that's, let's just say they're coming in late in the morning, and we have to sit down and start a progressive discipline policy with them. So we have to discipline them. Is Mom in the back of our head saying, you be nice to this person? And, we have to kind of turn around and say, hey, Mom, if I'm nice to this person, in a month from now, I may have to fire them. Let me be a little firm with them right now in hopes to straighten them out.
And it's not about being cruel or mean or offensive. It's about having the appropriate response and the appropriate attitude for the circumstance and situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And finally, the 7th attribute of a high-octane leader is incremental change is just as important as massive disruption. Jake, so many business leaders are looking at disruptive technology. You can't actually read a strategic management textbook right now without technological disruption or massive disruption, or one of those terms being in chapter 1. And the fact is that, yes, technology has created tremendous amounts of disruption. But we also have to remember that small changes, incremental changes, almost imperceptive changes can also bring about great strides in the organization. It doesn't necessarily mean that the organization has to redefine itself every day. What it means is that we, the employees, have to redefine ourselves every day in small ways, in little things.
And I couldn't agree with you more. One of my favorite books and one of my favorite writers is Darren Hardy, and he wrote a book called The Compound Effect. And the idea is, would you rather have $1 million today, or would you rather have a penny doubled for 30 days? And the idea is, a lot of people would take that $1 million today, but a penny doubled over 30 days results in over $5 million at the end of 30 days. And that's the power of small incremental steps taken over time with consistency that are going to have the biggest impact long-term on your results. Are you in it for the fast win, or are you in it for the long-term growth that's sustainable and actionable? And so I love that step. I told you that number 6 was my favorite. I think it's still slightly my favorite, but I love this incremental steps attribute as well, 7. Now, Bill, as we get towards the end of the episode here, and I want to really thank you for your time coming on, and these 7 attributes are just tremendous. Thanks for giving us a sneak peek on a book that's coming out shortly. Before we let you go, there's a section that I love in the episode called Learning from Leaders. It's where we get to know you on a personal level to go along with this business discussion by asking a few questions about what you're reading and what you're thinking. How does that sound?
Oh, sure.
How about the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
Jake, you're going to laugh. Our backgrounds are very similar. We both have bachelor's degrees in philosophy and advanced degrees in business. Right now on my nightstand is Bertrand Russell's A History of Western Philosophy. It's 900 pages of raw intellect, and I could probably only read about 3 or 4 paragraphs at a time before I become totally exhausted. But that's what I'm reading again. I read it as an undergraduate. I kind of lost something by reading this when I was 19.
You know what? I read it at, I think, 21 or 22, and you're right. There's a lot that you lose over, especially when you're reading it not to learn, but to regurgitate for a test. And I think this goes back to your number 2 attribute of a leader, and that is intensity is a choice. You give your mind that intensity of 3 or 4 paragraphs, and then you kind of let it break a little bit. And so we love that. How about your leadership superpower?
Well, I find that a disciplined lifestyle is very, very important to me. Now, let me define that a little bit. I know before the broadcast we were actually talking about a little bit, and I live in Costa Rica right now. I live in Tamarindo, which is on the Pacific Gold Coast of Costa Rica. This is a very easy place to become undisciplined if you want to. What I do is wake up at about 4 a.m. And I have a fairly disciplined routine that I go through between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning. And my goal is by 6:30, after downing at least a pot of coffee, I want to be on the beach for a half an hour, 45 minutes of complete mind expansion. And I get home sometime around 7:15 or 7:30. And at that point, by 8 o'clock or so, I'm ready to start my day. Now, I've already invested 4 hours in personal development. I've invested 4 hours in relaxing, expanding my mind, and getting ready to start. Now I'm ready to start. And what I find is that by disciplining myself, I am able to burn through my day very quickly, very efficiently. Some people think that self-discipline is restricting. I disagree with that. I think that self-discipline is actually liberating. Self-discipline means that you're going to do what you need to do when you need to do it, so that the rest of the time you can do what you want to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I love this discipline concept, Bill. And as you were talking through that, all I could think about is the bio that I read. Now, on air, I read just a small portion of it, but the amount of things that you've gotten done in your lifetime, and these are just the things that you've presented out to the public, is astonishing. And this is the only way that you could have got it done. It's this discipline. Achievers are disciplined because it frees you up to do the things that you want to do and need to do at the times that you need and want to do them. And so I think this is an absolute superpower that you have, and I thank you for sharing it. How about your leadership mantra, philosophy, or quote?
I think I actually sent you some emails. It's actually on there.
Yeah, it is.
The best way out of a problem is through it. Let's not dilly-dally. I do a lot of business with companies in Texas, and I love Texas because of the aphorisms that Texans have. Like, for example, if there's somebody that's a big bragger, they'll say, that guy is all hat and no cattle, meaning that he's got the 10-gallon hat, but no cattle to back it up. One of the things that I love, one of the aphorisms that I love in Texas is quit spitting on your hands and start hoeing. In other words, everybody's fixing to start. How about we stop that and we just get through the problem?
It's the ready, aim, 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 aim. We got to fire. We got to move. And then we can adjust if our aim's off a little bit, but you can't just keep spitting on your hands. You got to hoe that field. Work needs to be done. All right, Bill, our last question for you then is the book that you most often gift to friends, colleagues, or coworkers.
Well, out of personal self-respect, it's my book, Gold's book, Embracing Personal Responsibility in an Age of Entitlement. I wrote that book about 5 years ago, Jake, and I made it required reading for my economics students. I always required my economics students to read outside of economics. And I found that Gold's book was a tremendous read for them because it allowed them to kind of have a break from the technical side of what economics actually is. when I start writing goals book, it was actually about 350 pages. It was a tome on filling out these forms and completing the blanks and so forth. And it was so gaunt and sterile and angular that I threw it out. And I don't even have a copy of it anymore. But what I did is I wrote a parable. I wrote a book, a story about a CEO taking a young man who happens to have been an employee of his under his wing and sending him out to different people. And these people teach this young man an attribute of goal setting. And it turns out to be about 170 pages. And the response that I'm getting from individuals is that it really simplifies the goal setting process. So that's Goals Book. It did pretty well for itself. I actually completed a sequel to Goals Book that I very originally called Goals Book 2. That's out there too. Now, just to show individuals that I can write a little bit more intellectually if necessary, I have a 500-page book that is about ready to be released on the philosophy of leadership called Provocative Leadership. That, along with a couple of ebooks, is keeping me kind of busy.
Yeah, I would say so. And we are going to link all of those up on the show notes to this episode. Bill, we can't thank you enough for coming on. Before we let you go, any last bit of advice, and how can we connect with you?
You can connect with me very easily, intelligentmotivationinc.com, intelligentmotivationinc.com. You can email me from there, or you can actually set up a call with me. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. And also, if you are on LinkedIn, ladies and gentlemen, I only have 15,000 LinkedIn subscribers, 15,300. I have 10,000 more before I max out. Help me.
Let's max out Bill for him. We'll link all that up for you, Bill, on the show notes. Any last bit of advice, and we'll let you get going for today.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, just live with passion, unbridled abandon. Get out there, do it, make it happen. Don't accept excuses from anybody, especially from yourself.
That's terrific, Bill. Thank you for taking a little time away from the beach and all the other things that you're doing to come and be a guest expert on modern leadership. This is one of the most applicable and actionable episodes that we've ever had. And I'm going to sing your praises in the closing to this because I have just loved every minute of it. I've taken 4 pages of notes.
Well, thank you so much, as have I. Jake, I feel blessed that we've had the ability to meet. Thank you.
Well, my friends, I would say that was one of our most actionable episodes that we've ever had. I mean, if you walk down those 7 steps that Bill walked us through as far as the 7 attributes of high-octane leaders, if you just walk through those, I mean, you can't help but become a better leader. And so actionable, such a great storyteller and great persona about him. I was glad to connect with him. We had a little bit of a problem trying to get everything worked out because he's down in Costa Rica and we had some issues with the Skype, but I'm glad that it all came through and we have this episode. I think you'll really enjoy it. Again and again, this is definitely one that I'm going to listen to multiple times. Until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life, and of course, stay awesome. Oh, hey, before I stay awesome, of course, everything that we talked about in this episode can be found on the show notes that are located at jakeacarlson.com/ML72 for episode 72. And that's where we can get the quotes and the books and everything that we talked about, including a list of the 7 attributes of high-octane leaders. Until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life, and of course, stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.